Good morning. It's Sunday, May 17th, and we're continuing with Chapter 7. So in 7.8, we are defining a very simple function, and this function is going to accept a list, and it's going to return that list. It doesn't do anything to the list. It doesn't manipulate it or carry out any functions. However, the point here is that functions can accept many data types. It can accept a number, like an integer. It can accept a dictionary. It can accept a list. And it can also return many data types. Now, since we're here, okay, we can take a look at this function here. And notice you can run a function without it actually putting any information on the screen. So if I remove print here, the function will be called with a list of numbers 3, 5, and 7, and it will return that to you, but nothing will be displayed on the screen. Now you might be thinking, wow, that's pretty useless. Well, no, not necessarily. We can create a new variable here. We'll call it new list. Okay, and that new list that's being returned to us is assigned to this variable here. So there's a lot of different possibilities besides just simply displaying information on the console. In 7.9, we are doing something a little bit more interesting. We are sending the same list. We're making our function call. We're sending the list 3, 5, and 7 to our function, and then we see index value 1, okay, which is the second element in the list, 5. That's what gets returned to us, and after it gets returned, it gets printed onto the console. In 7.10, we have the same list, 3, 5, and 7. We make a function call, and then we're taking the second element of that list. We see index value 1. Recall that the first element has index value 0, and then 1, and then 2. So we're taking the second number in that list, which is 5, adding 3, and then we're changing that element in that list. So we're referencing this element here by index number. So that number will be changed to 8, and then we're going to print the new list on the screen, on the console, when it gets returned to us. In 7.11, we have the same list again. We're making our function call, but this time in our function, we're using the append method. So what we're doing here is we're going to expand the list. So we're going to have 3, 5, 7, and then 9, and then we're going to print the result on the screen. So let's take a look at this here. Copy, and we'll paste it into our favorite code editor. And I'm just going to make a small modification here so my code is compliant with Python 3, because this is a Python 3 editor. So let's go ahead and run this, and you can see the numbers 3, 5, 7, 9 has been added to the list. In 7.12, now in 7.12 things get a little bit interesting here. Before, when we created a for loop, okay, what we did is we just simply specified the list name. So we typed print underscore list, and this type of for loop will iterate through the entire list. It will loop for a 3, then a 5, then the 7, and what will it do? In each case, it will print out that element on the screen. Here, the I refers to the index value. So we start with index value 0, and we go right to the end of the list. That's one syntax for looping through a list or iterating through a list. Here's another one. Now we have range 0. That's an index value. Okay, so the element with index value 0 is 3. It's the first element. And then here we see the length of the list. Well, the length of the list is 3. Okay, so this could be a little confusing. That first number that you see there is the start index. The last number you see here is an index as well. It's the end index, plus 1. And if you're not convinced, well, look at this. Here, the index value is 2 for the last element, and then add 1 to it, it becomes 3. So let's look at our original, what we had here originally. Okay, we were starting at index 0, and we went up to the length of the list, which is 3. Okay, so be careful. First number is an index value. Second number here is just specifying the position in the sequence. Third position, that number should be 3. Now in 713, we have the same list again. Doesn't matter if the list is at the top or at the bottom. We're iterating through that list, and we're doubling every element in the list. So take that element, whatever it is, multiply it by 2, and that's the new value. So when we're iterating, we start with the number 3. 3 times 2 is 6. That first position there is going to have a 6 in there. And then we do the same thing with the 5 and the 7. So a picture says 1,000 words. So let's copy this into Python and give it a try. And this time what gets returned to us is a new list, the list of the numbers that we looked at before, but this time it will be doubled, and I think we forgot to put the list in there. So let's grab the numbers, the list, and it doesn't matter whether you put it at the top or at the bottom. Okay, so now we should see the numbers 6, 10, and 14. 6, 10, and 14. Let's continue to example 714. So 714 explores this new syntax. So you can just specify one number there in your range. Here's your range. Okay, you don't have to go through the whole list. We don't have to go through all the numbers or all the items in the list. We can just specify a stop range. So we're going to stop at 4. Now, if we stop at 4, that means we're stopping at index value 3. Okay. Another possibility is you mention the start and stop. Now, be careful here. That start value means index. That stop value is not an index. It just is referring to the position. So if you're going up to the 4th number, that stop position is 4, and that can be confusing. It's not index value, it's index value and position. And then you can see in the last example here, start and stop, but we also have a step value. So let's say we want to start at the beginning of our list, index value 0, and we want to go up to the 10th item in that list. We put the number 10. It would have index number value 9, but it's the 10th position. And if we don't mention any step, by default, it's going to go up by 1. 0, 1, 2, all the way up to 10. However, you don't have to do that necessarily. You can step by 2. Okay, so this is the start index, the end position, and the step. So in this case, we are printing out a group. We're printing out numbers, and the default step would be 1. In example 715, we're taking our list of numbers, 3, 5, 7 again. We're iterating through that list, and look what we're doing. We're doing something interesting here. We're taking a new variable, result, we're initializing it to 0 before we enter the for loop. Okay, we initialize it to 0, and what this is going to do, this line right here, it's going to add up those numbers. Okay, so how does this work? We enter the loop for the first time. Okay, number is going to be 3 the first time you go into that loop when you're iterating through that list, and we're adding 0 to it. Okay, so the new value of result is 3. Okay, 3 plus 0. Then we iterate again. This time number is 5. So we're going to have 5 there. Result is 3 from last time we looped. 3 plus 5 becomes 8. Result is 8. And then we grab the last number, 7. 7 plus 8 is 15. And then it's going to return the number 15 to us. In 716, we have a for loop again, but this time we're not looping with numbers. We're not iterating through numbers. We're iterating through names. And we're using the plus sign here. Now, we have to be careful with plus. Plus means different things depending on what you have on either side of it. So if we have two numbers, two integers, well, plus obviously means to add them together. In this case, plus would mean to concatenate those two words. So it means to put those two words together. If, on the other hand, those two items on either side of the list was, oops, sorry about that. If the two items there were lists, then it means create one big list out of those two lists. So let's go ahead, copy this into our code editor. Okay, and I'm going to make a small modification here. And what our function is going to do is it's going to join those two names together. And you can see Michael Lieberman with no space in the middle. So there's a few ways of rectifying this. Here's my favorite way of rectifying it. Put a space in the middle. Okay, and how do you do a space? You do a quote, a set of quotations, a space, and then you put another concatenation or plus sign there. So what do we have? We have Michael and then the word Lieberman, or we have a space added every time. And then we'll go on to 717. This time we have two lists, and this time when we enter our function, we see the plus sign, but again, plus means different things with different elements. In this case, we're taking two lists and we're going to join them into one list. So the plus sign has a different meaning here. You're not adding numbers, you're combining two lists together to form one list. Okay, so the plus sign on a string means concatenate. On a two lists, it means to join them together to make one list. And if they're two integers, then you're just adding it in the usual way. So let's go ahead and plug that in. And you can see here we have one list created out of those two lists. Now in the final example here, 718, we have a list of lists. Okay, so we have within our square brackets another set of square brackets. That's our first list, and that is our second list. Now, how do you iterate through all those items? You do it by creating two for loops, a for loop inside a for loop. Is this difficult? Absolutely, but you'll get used to it. You'll do it so many times, it will become second nature. And in fact, in the next exercise, we'll have a chance to do it. So the first for loop is really going through the different lists. Here's the first list, here's the second list. So let's say we take the first list. So we've entered now the inner for loop, or the nested one, and this inner one is now going to iterate through those numbers 1, 2, 3. So what are we going to do? We're going to append it to result, which is an empty list. So this is a way of making one list out of two, and then we're going to print out the result. So let's quickly copy this into our code editor. I only have 15 minutes per video with this screencast software. And we click run, and we see that out of those two lists, the list of lists, we've now created one list, and it's done with one for loop inside another.